So I guess as a soil scientist, I've always been pretty interested in soil health, and I would thank Miri for introducing the soil health principles earlier today. So the 5 soil health principles are keeping the soil covered, plant species diversity, growing plants as long as possible, minimal disturbance, and livestock incorporation. And I guess I've seen a number of farmers implementing these principles, and I'm really interested in what they're doing. But at the end of the day, for me to be able to farm, we've had to expand. For my brother and I to both be able to farm, we've had to expand our enterprise. And then through succession planning, that debt has then been shifted down the generation, and so things have got to pay for themselves. So I guess that's really hence my. And at the end of the day, a farm's a business. It's not a charity. So, that's where I've come from. So the data that I'm presenting today is probably the most representative and best set of data that I've come across in my study, and it's data from the UK. And so they have defined regenerative agriculture as implementing either one or more of the 5 soil health principles. So this is the data set that we've got from the Groundswell group is the group of regenerative farmers, and they've contributed their data to this benchmarking source. The company is called the Land Family Business. So they are a group of conventional farmers. Within this data set, there's about 70 farmers on the Land Family Business company who've contributed their data to that. And then there's only about 7 or 8 growers in the Groundswell group. So the GG is what is the regenerative farmers, and the LFB is your conventional farmers. So over this is a 4-year set of data where they've had 2 really good years in 2022 and 2021, and then they've had a below average year, a very poor year in 2020, and then they had a below average year in 2019. And so what you can see, if we look at the top 3 rows, that the Groundswell group output in terms of pounds per hectare compared to the conventional farmers was on average over the 3 years 340 pounds per hectare less in terms of pounds per hectare less than the conventional farmers. And this was particularly accentuated in the good years, 2022 and 2021. The crux of the costs rows are that your regenerative growers have a lot lower cost base, and then this is also accentuated when fertiliser prices have gone up in, say, 2022, for example, where you see they've got the conventional growers have 200 pounds per hectare more variable and fixed costs. But then if you go to the lower rows, just looking at the margin, I guess that's the bottom line, right? That's why it's on the bottom. On average over the 4 years, the difference was that the conventional farmers made 100 pounds per hectare more, and obviously you can see it's almost 200 pounds per hectare more in the good years, and then on an average over the poorer years, it's 0. So I guess my question from this, there's multiple questions from this data, one of which is, are you going to have good years or are you going to have bad years? So what's your opinion of the future? Are you an optimist? And if you think you're going to have good years, why would you change your practices? And that's probably another thing that came across is risk. What's your attitude to risk? Are you someone who's prepared to spend a little bit more and then therefore make the most of it in the good times? Or are you someone who's really doesn't want to risk anything? And I think that was really highlighted, I chatted to Blake Vince, who was the Nuffield Canada chair, and why he's a real soil health advocate and would consider himself a regenerative farmer. Why do you do it? It's just about risk. I can't control the markets, I can't control the weather, but I can control my inputs. So therefore, if I don't put as much in, I'm risking less, and I'm more comfortable with that system. I also spoke to one of the better performers of the conventional growers that's in that data set. Why don't you farm regeneratively? Oh, it's all about risk. I know this works for me. I'm not against farming that way, but unless my neighbour does it and I see that his crops are as good as mine, why would I? Probably one of the things that obviously this is just one set of data and it's a broad brush of incorporating some or all of the principles. One of the things that I probably really want to touch on that I see as having potential for growers is something like intercropping, where multiple crops are grown at one time. And that was touched on earlier today, talking about improved productivity as a result of either more species or more varieties or more species within the mix. So from here, I just really would like to acknowledge all of those that have made this possible. I really sincerely thank Nuffield Australia for seeing through my poor performance in the interviews. So I really appreciate that. GRDC for sponsoring me and having faith in me. My wife and family, I mean, really without their support, obviously, I couldn't do any of this. To all of my hosts, I mean, as has been said, fantastic of them to tolerate me for the time that I spent with them. I really thank them. Thanks.
Not yet. They make you stand up for a little bit longer. So I'm going to ask Daniel one question and then we'll move on to the floor, so get your questions ready. We've heard the theory and we've heard in practice it should work, but is intercropping actually practical, and have you tried it, and what have the outcomes been?
I think that probably depends on your attitudes a little bit. I guess I saw a farmer in Wagga Wagga who I thought was a fantastic example with that intercropping, in that he got a greater yield from his canola and vetch compared to his canola alone. Not only did he get a greater yield from the mix, 40% of his output was vetch, which is of higher value than the canola as well. So that was really interesting. Then I asked him about weed control. No in-crop weed control. So for us, that kind of mixture is where radish could be a problem. And I've tried a bit of that on my place, and the hot spots where the sheep camps are, yep, it's definitely an issue. So is it something I'd do into the future? Well, that's playing with it now. We'll see what happens. But having said that, with the weed control, one thing that I saw in Kansas, completely different system that I thought was really interesting, and it was replicated within their trials, is where they were playing with a perennial wheatgrass, and they had plots of this, what they called kernza, and there was weeds in it. There was plots of where they had lucerne, and that was full of weeds. And then they had plots of 50% kernza, 50% lucerne, and there weren't any weeds. So I think it needs a lot of investigation.
Yep, so you need to do another world tour?
If someone's willing to fund me.
Cool. Thank you. If everyone can give a round of applause to Daniel.